In this video I'm going to walk you through installing NetBSD. Turn the computer on here. This is a i386 platform machine. It's a Dell Precision 360. Now obviously I've already got an SD card that I have put the NetBSD installation image on, and it's the correct image for the hardware that I have. This is what I get when I boot from this SD, this USB stick, and I'm going to pick option 1, or if I keep talking here it's going to pick it for me. You're maybe wondering why I'm doing this. I made a video yesterday of running the installation, and it turns out that the 300 some gigabyte hard drive that I used was defective. So here I am using the 81 or whatever it is gigabyte hard drive instead, and I figured this would be a good opportunity to demonstrate how this installation process goes, because I know a lot of people have questioned me about this. It's very different than obviously Windows or a lot of the modern Linuxes. I think some of the older Linuxes had installation procedures very much like this, but my memory is not that good and I could be wrong about that. Now it takes a while to boot from this USB image, and the first thing we're asked is what language we're using. Basically determines, I think, what keyboard you have. I'm going to pick US English. I think if you do unchanged it will use US English, or if you've run this installation before and you run it again, then it'll pick whatever you used the last time. And here we have a menu. You can install, you can upgrade, you can reinstall sets or additional. I don't even know exactly what that does. Obviously you can reboot the computer. You can you get a utility menu here where you can run a shell and do kind of maintenance or whatever you have to do before you do this. You could configure your network. I won't do that right now because I'll end up doing it later. There's a bunch of other utility things here that you really don't need to do. Config menu, this will be handled by the installation process. I won't get into that right now here. So I'm going to say install NetBSD to a hard disk. Not sure how well that shows up here. Yeah, it doesn't. Camera does not cooperate at all on that, but it's the first option: install NetBSD to hard disk. And you've got a choice to make here. This was something that the first time I installed NetBSD kind of shocked me. If you say yes here, you're pretty committed. You will lose everything on your hard drive once you get past this point. So make sure you have the right idea of what you're going to do here. And it's going to say, shall we continue? I'm going to say yes. And I've got to choose which hard disk I want to use, and in my case it's this WD0, which is probably what you're going to have too. That's the first IDE or SATA or whatever hard drive on this platform. I have this other drive here, which is an external drive, which I do not want to install on, so I'm going to pick WD0. And it asks me if the geometry is correct, and I don't know if you'll ever find that it isn't, but if you know that it isn't, then you know what to do here. So I'm just going to say this is the correct geometry. And I have an option of use the entire disk or edit the partition table. Now normally you might use the entire disk. I'm not going to, because this drive has some vendor specific partition on it in case I ever want to reinstall the operating system it came from or something like that. So I'm going to edit the table. Now here you can see there's this partition put here by Dell for reinstalling Windows or whatever it was on this original machine. Now here we've got some NetBSD partitions and a partition that's not used. The reason this is because in the distant past I have installed NetBSD on this hard drive. So normally you would not see this. And I guess I've got this external, or not external, but auxiliary 30 meg partition here for some reason, and I'll keep that. I don't exactly know why that's there, but I want to use this larger 73 gigabyte partition to actually do the installation. Now, this install flag is turned on, and I'm not sure why. It normally wouldn't be. This would normally look like this, where you probably can't see this on the camera. There will not be a capital I in the flags column, and we do want to have that on, and by selecting install here, I'm going to turn that flag on. And again, I don't know how well that shows up, but that's important, otherwise the installation will not succeed. Do I want to update the boot code in the master boot record? I can't think of a good reason not to do this. I always do it. I suppose if you don't know what your existing settings were and you want to keep them, but I don't know why that would happen. Now here it's asking us if we want to set the sizes of the NetBSD partitions or use the existing partition sizes. These existing sizes are good enough for me. It's whatever I defined the last time, or if you're doing this installation for the first time, it probably sets them up the way you want. I'm going to say the partitions are okay. It's going to ask me a name for the disk, and you can name it whatever you want. I don't think this means anything. Now, this is where you're totally committed. If you decide for some reason that you do not want to wipe out your hard drive, this is where you must hit no. Once I hit yes, we're going to start formatting. And it really does format that drive completely. You lose everything on it. Now it's going to ask what boot block you would like to use. Now this is in case you want to use a remote console, and I normally do. I would normally use serial port COM0 here, and I would have to set the serial baud rate in this menu. You can use your existing boot blocks. That's where you've installed NetBSD before and you're happy with the way it was configured. In most cases, most people are going to use the BIOS console, which means when NetBSD boots, your console will happen in the hardware frame buffer, the primary one, whatever the computer normally uses, not a serial console. So that's what I'm going to use for this installation. And now it prompts me to exit, so I've selected the BIOS console. Now I'm going to exit. And here you select your distribution. You can do a full installation without X11, minimal installation, or custom installation, or you can abandon it. Abandoning it is kind of pointless at this juncture because you have already formatted your disk, and I don't know why you would do that, but it's there, I guess, if you ever want to. I don't know that this 81 or 75, whatever it is, gigabyte drive will fit a full installation. It might. But I don't need X11 for my purposes anyway, so I'm going to install without X11. I can always add it later. And here you can choose to install from your installation media, which is the default, or you can install over the internet, and you've got a couple other options here too. If you install from your install media, you get whatever version came on there. And in my case, I usually use HTTP. If you don't have unlimited data on your network connection, you obviously wouldn't want to do this. Or if you specifically wanted the version that's on your install media, you wouldn't do this. So I think this is the normal option for most people, though. I use HTTP. You can do FTP, but HTTP is much faster. And it's going to let you configure how the HTTP system works here. The installation, I should say, works. And you normally don't want to mess with any of this stuff. If you know what you're doing, you could, but I don't see a good reason to at this point. But I do have to configure my network, or the HTTP protocol will fail because there's no network to use. So configure network, and this was the option in the first menu that I skipped. And my available network interfaces are shown here. The one I'm using is the only one that exists. And I may have to do something here to blur this information out, but what I'll do is I'll block the camera here so I don't have to go and edit this later. But I'm going to put my network settings in here, and you really could auto configure, which would use DHCP. I don't ever do that. So my network details here are specific to my network, and it's probably not a good idea to go advertising that. So bear with me here while I type this in. And it's asking me if they're okay, and I said yes, and there my network is configured. So now I go get distribution. And this is going to process for a while, and it's pretty automatic. Well, it's entirely automatic until this portion of the installation is done, but then you will come back and do other things. So I'm going to pause the video here, and hopefully my camera will let me resume when this lengthy downloading process is done. I'm unpausing the camera just because I don't trust it to recover if I leave it sit too long. I wish I had set up a clock here so I could show how long this installation takes. Now, if I had installed over or from the installation media that I have here, it probably would go faster. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that this installation is not something you want to sit down and watch. Do it overnight or do it while you've got something else going on. I'm not exactly sure how long this takes, maybe half hour, maybe an hour. I never really care because I always start it up and find something else to do. So here I'm going to pause the camera again, and hopefully it comes back like it did this time. Alright, seems like the camera is cooperating. At this point, that portion of the installation is done. It's asking me if I want to use the network information that I used for the installation process permanently, and the answer is yes. I did configure this machine exactly the way I want the network to be configured. It says the extraction of the selected sets for NetBSD is complete. The system is now able to boot from the selected hard disk. But there are other things I want to do here first, and that's basically what it's telling me. My network is configured. My time zone is incorrect. I want my time zone to be, I think they have Chicago in here, and that's what we're going to use. My root shell is SH, just like I want it to be. I'm going to change my root password. You do want to do that here. I guess you don't have to, and that's one of the advantages of NetBSD, but this is the place to do it if you're going to do it. Okay, so I've set my root password. I do want to install the binary packages. I always do this. I can't think of a good reason not to unless you're seriously starved for disk space and you have a very specific purpose that you don't need these things. And basically I'm going to accept all these options and just say install. And here's another part where it takes a while. So I will be pausing the camera here and come back when it's done. Well, the binary package installation has been configured here or installed, so we are done with that. Next thing to do is fetch and unpack package source for building from source. You don't actually need to do this. I generally do because once in a while I do have to build packages from source code, so I'm going to install that. Same procedure as before. If you know what you're doing, I suppose you could change something here. Otherwise, fetch and unpack package source. And again, this takes time, so I will be pausing the camera. Again, that portion is done. You have some other configuration options here. I'm going to enable SSHD. I don't use that a whole lot, but there are some times when it's nice to have. I'm not going to enable the NTPD. I don't see a point in doing that. It asks me if I want to run NTP date at boot. I'm going to say yes in this case. Enable MDNSD. I'm not even sure what that is. Enable XDM, the X Display Manager. No, I'm not going to do that because I have not installed X11. Enable CGD is set to yes. Don't know what that is. Excuse me. LVM. Don't know. RAID frame is set to yes. Not sure what bearing that has on anything. I'm going to add a user, and I'm probably going to pause the camera here just so you don't see my default username. Okay, so you can add users there. It's a good place to add them if you know what users you're going to use on this machine. So now I can finish configuring, and it says the installation of NetBSD is now complete. Hit enter to continue. And it's unmounting the installation media, and I think it does reboot the machine here. We will see shortly. This shouldn't take too long. Now I hope you found this helpful. I do know that if you've never done this before, it can be intimidating. At least you could watch this and see what you're going to be doing, and you'll know what to expect. And this is by far, I think, the most common hardware platform, although the X64 or whatever they call it, the AMD 64, is probably more common now. I wouldn't know. But that installation procedure is almost identical to this, if not, it might be identical. And I think you'll find on most platforms, and I have found this on the limited number of platforms that I have installed NetBSD on, that this installation procedure is extremely similar. If you've done it on here or you've seen it on here, you can do it on other platforms too. And this is taking longer than I expected. There doesn't seem to be any activity on the USB stick anymore. So I may be at a point here where I can pull the plug and boot. Give it a couple more seconds here to make sure. There is some more activity, so I'll leave it go here. A lot of these things, I don't know how long they take. Like I said earlier, I don't normally sit around and watch them. And that's true here too. I was off doing other things while the installation was going on. I give up. I am going to forcefully remove my USB stick, and it's going to complain about that. And then I'm going to power down, which may or may not be successful here. If it's not, I will pull the plug. Okay, I'm pulling the plug. And now the installation should work. I obviously removed the USB stick. Now I've got this funny thing. Maybe have a CD in here that it doesn't like or something. No. I've got other hardware issues. It seems that the hard drive that I chose to use here doesn't work very well. Let's see if it works this time. this is not promising, but I can assure you this is not anything I did wrong with the installation. This is a hardware problem. So hopefully you found this video helpful, despite the fact that I did not achieve what I was trying to do here. And please like, comment, and subscribe. And I don't know, okay, maybe my external hard drive was trying to boot. So there you go, know your hardware and how to configure it, and you'll have no trouble. This is the installation that I just installed. It is running. This computer will now correctly boot to it. This is taking longer than I expect it should. Again, I could have a hardware configuration problem. And I probably do, but I can work that out. This doesn't have any bearing on the installation. So again, thank you for watching.